The information I needed.
Okay, so you were at the meeting this morning, person is currently trying to get an extension, or did he already get an extension? Because I was talking about mine, hey, do we need to do anything to move things forward for their transportation plan? Okay, okay. So it wasn't that it wasn't doable,
Right.
it's just that he's got, okay.
It sounds like.
Yeah, it sounds like they want to have a plan to where anything, maybe it's at least having official request in that's started with
Rhonda, are we ready? Okay, well, let's start. Before we call the meeting to order, if we could have the pledge and the prayer by Greg Demopoulos today, if you would. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for the opportunity we have to serve our community. Thank you for the people that have gathered here. Protect us, guide us in our conversation. That we may continue to improve our community for the lives of others. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. So I now formally call the meeting to order, and our first two items of business are the minutes from January 19th and the minutes from February 16th. So any discussion, comment on the meeting minutes from January 19th? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
There's been a motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor say nay. The ayes have it. The minutes from January 19th are passed. Looking at the minutes from February 16th, is there any discussion on those? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion.
Move that we accept these.
A motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes from Thursday, February 16th are approved. The next item of agenda is Amy for an update on the HELP project.
Amy Rowe, Community Coordinator for Kosciuszko County. So currently at this juncture, we have the strategic investment plan complete. So that is a huge milestone for those who have been part of this process. Corey was.
Yes,
Corey knows.
congratulations.
Yes, so it's very beautiful. We will have that adoption, I believe, on the 11th for the commissioners, right, Rhonda? And then the 13th for the council? Okay. So that was the final document that completed the final phase. And once that phase is complete, that unlocks the funding phase. So that's very important for us. And it took a lot of fast talking and hard praying to make that happen. So we were able as a team to be able to get all the information that each of the communities wanted to have in that, and that was the biggest part of that. So the next stage after April, we'll begin doing income surveys. And so those are required for us to meet the LMI, the low to moderate income level, for the funding source that is the match, the CDBG funds that I've been speaking about. We anticipate that most likely we'll have to do an income survey for Mentone and Pearston, and then also for the trail project for Chinworth. So I know that Carrie has spoken about looking at extending that potential project because of attempting to figure out how we can make sure that that project would fit within LMI. So there probably will be much conversation once we are able to start having that. You're with MACOG, right? So I don't know exactly how the income surveys, have you done an income? Okay, so talk to us a little bit about how that process works, because I actually am learning this as I sit here. So what does that look like?
Donnie, could you step up and so the
Yeah,
microphone picks you
this
up?
will- I
know
think this will help us all,
One of the-
because I don't actually know much about this phase. This is a new thing for me.
One of the feedback I will tell everybody that we got at the meeting was it's really hard to hear, so I need to remind everybody to try to use the microphones.
Yes, no, thank you.
So talking through how to do an income
Yeah,
survey
so
or
what does
what to
that look
expect.
like? Yeah, what to expect, because I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Sure. So looking at like Mentone, for example, the first step that we will need to do is define the service area to determine that the income status. Once we have determined that service area, then we will need to populate random addresses that we'll need to go out and actually survey. This has to be randomized. We can't pick and choose, the people that we know who are low or moderate income. It's not a fair process to do something like that. State wouldn't allow that and be happy if we did. So there's a randomized tool that we use that generates a random amount of addresses. Once we have that master list, they will then shorten that down to the number of households that we'll need to actually survey, the number of people that we actually need to get responses for within those households. And then we can go out and start conducting the surveys. Once we start doing the surveying, it would be of best interest to let the public know, like in the Mentone community, for example, that we're going to be going out doing this and that they should sit. It won't be some random person asking about their income limits. And it's the responses that we get are confidential, and it's more of a higher level range of income limit. It's not to pick out people's personal income levels. It's just to say within your household, do you make X number within this range? And if the answer is yes or no, we check a box, and then we move on to the next house. And based on what they say, if it's at or over that percentage, then they are, in according to Orca's eyes or the state eyes, deemed as a household that with low to moderate income. We'll do that for all the houses that we randomize the list for, and we will need to, within that sampling, need to hit that 51% low to moderate income percentage number. If we meet that or over that, we will share those results with the state, and we will be able to proceed with the next step.
And how long does that generally take?
It can vary, usually about a couple weeks, but it could vary just based on, the timing of getting all the information collected, but plan on at most maybe a month. And the results are good once we get the final results of the income surveys, depending on future projects and the service area of future projects. If it's another project within the town of Mentone, for example, the income survey results are good for a minimum of 5 years. So you won't have to redo it again if they want to pursue another grant opportunity, as long as it's within the same service area. If it's a different service area, then you would have to do another income survey based again on the service area for the project.
And those are good for any grants that would involve the LMI category?
Yes.
It's like a restriction?
Well, yes, but again, it depends on the service area.
Okay.
So a water master utility study, for example, that service area is going to be different than like if a fire station needs to be reconstructed or need to go through a feasibility study, again, because it's a different service area. So it just depends on the project and then the service area for that project.
Okay. So the hope is, thank you,
Yep.
Tony, I appreciate that. So that, all of that they'll help us with, praise the Lord for them, because I know nothing about that. So that will be essential to ensure that we can determine from a county level what money is available to be spent. And that specifically looks like if one of the named towns is not eligible because they are lower than the 51%, then they would not be eligible to use that CDBG money. And that would provide more money for other projects that would be identified. So as usual in this process, it is a bit of a Tetris game, but we have navigated to the next level of the Tetris game. So we are complete with the SIP once that's done in April. We anticipate to work with MACOG, hopefully in either the end of April, beginning of May, to start the process for the income surveys. And then we hope to complete that by the end of May or beginning of June, and then circle back around. I'll lean on Rhonda to figure out when we can do a collective commissioner and council meeting, because we will be butting up against the budget season. So we will try to figure out, and so that it will be probably, I'm going to shoot hopefully for June or the latest at July. At that meeting, probably everybody that has a vested interest would want to be at that meeting, because that will be when the county commissioners and the council determine how they specifically would like to put the money towards projects. I think the Lake James project, I believe that there's a lot of complication with that, so we haven't had much discussion about even considering that from the parks. Okay. 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 So we would probably want to sit down again before we look at going towards the income survey to make sure that if that is something that we feel like is feasible and doable within, I think it's 2026, when the money has to be spent. So if that is something that we think can be done, then we would want to make sure that we have that at least determined to be able to present that as an option to the commissioners or to Okra if we have to do an income survey.
Maybe I should just jump in with a question.
Okay.
Yeah, microphone, please.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah.
Let me jump in with a question that kind of relates to it. And Troy mentioned to me a minute ago, his voice is weak today.
Oh,
So
course, Ray.
please add. So the reason that we were looking at adding a paddler's launch in the James Lake area was because there is in the county an area that's already low and moderate income.
That we anticipate is low to moderate. I do remember Greg looking at the map or somebody, and then we were trying to find, or was it Mike? Was it you, Mike? He was reaching out to Donnie, I believe, to determine, I'm trying to remember, because this is my memory, that was a few months ago, so I'm trying to bring it back, but I believe that we were looking at the LMI map that we received from MACOG and put it against the regular map to ensure that where we anticipated Lake James would be is indeed in that LMI category. Did we ever determine that?
And Donnie had helped us to look at where the census tracts are
Okay.
in the area that we thought was the correct census tract. But a question that I understood required an Okra explanation for is a place to launch a kayak or canoe or an egress to take it out of the water is what the project is. But who would use that? Is it only the people in the local community, or is it a much broader group of the public? So the question was, and I'm looking at Donnie because we had this in an email or phone exchange, and at that point, Okra had not made a determination, was my understanding, of would this use, where it would be really hard for us to say, it's only going to be local people that use it, would this be an appropriate use to qualify for the CDBG money?
And that goes back to the service area discussion that he was speaking about, and it would probably be why on the actual document that we spoke to each of the towns with, that project is, I believe, categorized as maybe for the CDBG funding. I think it's the service area question that probably would have to be determined. So,
But wouldn't that apply in any of our activities? I mean, if we're creating a park, even a pocket park, someone could use it. If we're creating a greenway, there's probably an expectation others will use it too. So is it a definition question?
That is always a question I have for Okra, because I feel like they tend to have nebulous.
Okay.
Is anybody from here? Don't put that in the paper. Sometimes, because I believe that they had looked at, if I remember correctly, having spoken to Mayor Tomer at one point, there was something that they wanted to do with Okra, but they were unable to do it because the service area question was too murky. So I think that I don't know how they determined that 100%. Sometimes I do unfortunately think that they do have their guidelines. The hard part for Okra is that they are the entity in the state of Indiana that is required to report back to HUD at the federal level. And so everything they do with the money that they receive for the CDBG, they are responsible. So they have to be comfortable with whatever it is that their guidelines are to ensure that they can meet federal guidelines at the HUD office. And so I think that's where sometimes these things get a little bit more murky. So if we have determined that this is something that's doable within the time frame, I think that was the last discussion I had been a part of, was that we were not sure if we could obtain the land and do everything that was necessary for the project within the 2025, I think, is for the CDBG funds. Has that changed?
When Troy and I talked, we said we should take the attitude of trying to move this forward until we know we can't,
Okay.
Yeah.
rather than saying, oh, I don't know if we can do it. But, so that's why I was wondering if it sounds like at this point, there's not clarity from Okra if this would be
An acceptable project.
Thank you.
Now,
Yeah.
the other side of that is that the county does have the ARPA funds. So there are less restrictions on the ARPA funds. We do have the $1.2 million that the combined county commissioners and county council will have to decide which projects to use that towards, and those would be for county projects, because it's the county ARPA funds. And so that project, if it indeed doesn't end up being eligible for the CDBG, could be reviewed. That will be up to the county commissioners and county council to determine how they divvy that up after the income survey. But if we need to, Donnie, look at an income survey for that, if it's a project that would align, then we probably need to figure out how we can add that one in as well. But I don't know how we would determine a service area, like you said, because ultimately it is a tourism activity. So it has the likelihood of bringing many people. How do they determine that? What is usually? Come back, Donnie. I'm going to learn something new today too, because it is very nebulous for me.
Yeah, that's a tricky question, as well as it's the same question for your trail project. It's going to be kind of hard, because in some ways, Okra's eyes, it's going to benefit the entire county, in which case, when you look at the entire county, you're under 51%. So, yeah. Sure, Corey?
We do economic impact study surveys. We're doing one for 2022 based on what Ford's economic impact was for 2022. We're obviously added for August. If you need me to, we have various surveys out to all the attractions that we need to speak for this. Would there be any help for that project related to surveying you may need from our part? Now, this isn't an independent study we do for the company to help with that potential, that one helps myself.
What you're talking to is when we're actually filling out the application and working on the project need and how it impacts the service area. That information will help tell that story.
So not prior to.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but good idea.
I was just thinking, there's a way to get around it that way.
I mean, the way to get around it is you're going to be looking at picking and choosing census tracts, which again is it's going to be tricky, and then just kind of looking at some of those census tracts around the lake, the James Lake area. Some of it is in the 30 ranges, so we would have to talk to Okra, get a justification letter to see if they see it's worth warranting, because maybe the margin of error is so high that we could have a case. If they're 39% in the census tract, but the margin of error is like 40% or something, 20%, then plus or minus 20, then you could have a chance of meeting that 51%.
And
So-
Mentone was odd because Mentone just, so we looked at the map that you guys had created, and that was in green as well. But when they had pulled the recent census data information, it showed at 50.8. So we did not anticipate to have to do an income survey for Mentone, but because they, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was the new census data, but they came in
was
most
the new
recently.
census.
The new census, okay, so that worked against us-ish, in essence, because we're off by that small amount. So this is a little more complicated. I don't think it's impossible. It's just we have to figure out how we,
Be strategic in how we try to determine the service area.
and for the service area for the Chinworth, so what we did speak to Okra about, this was a discussion we had with myself and Carrie and Ally, who is our personal guide through this process. The Chinworth project does actually look like it qualifies more, mainly because there are, the service area that we are going to make the statement that it serves is for the individuals in the trailer park area, and then Carrie had anticipated to bring it to Atwood and to look at it as a project, though it will be tourism, the specific purpose of the project will be transportation.
Yep.
For individuals from Atwood and the trailer park to get to Warsaw. So that one seemed, from Okra's eyes, to have an easier ability to navigate into the CDBG, as long as when we do the income survey, it will come back as the 51%. So that's what we were talking with Ally at Okra about, is the service area there, just looking at the, extending that to hopefully put us to that level. The Lake James, though it originally showed green, I think that where Okra pushed back is that the service area, it's more of a tourism activity. So though we had the right thought process, because it is in the green, because the service area extends to unlimited amount of people, and there's no case to be made about it being a mode of transportation, per se, that I think is a harder sell. Though not impossible for looking at with the ARPA funds, if that's something that the committee chooses to spend those funds on. With the CDBG, it just might be a little bit more complicated to navigate that. Do you think that's
Yeah,
an
that's fair.
accurate
Yeah,
assessment?
so it's a funding source, not a project.
Yeah, the project's great.
Yeah.
I mean, the project obviously is within what you guys had hoped to do. It's just looking at which funding source would be the most perfect fit for that, just due to the restrictions related to the CDBG guidelines.
Let me provide a little bit more information. So when Troy and I, we did a field trip one Sunday, 6 weeks ago or so. Probably. And we were trying to identify what would be reasonable locations, so close to a road, and ideally with entry right onto the Tippy River, rather than trying to get all the way to the lake shore. Because that entry onto the Tippy River close to a road we could identify undeveloped properties there. So when we looked at what seemed to be the best location, we thought there were 3 properties that would be within the right census tract. And Donnie and his colleagues at Maycock said, oh, actually, that's 3 different census tracts for those 3
wow.
properties.
What
So
would
we
we
were
do
down
without
to
them?
1.
Yeah.
And we wrote a letter to who we believe to be perhaps the owners of the property, or at least the address on record for the owners of the property. And we have not heard back from them. That doesn't mean we wouldn't hear back from them, but we don't know that, we have not, for this particular public launch site, identified an available property with a willing seller. However, okay, so this is, and also is the CDBG funding source even going to work? Now, the idea of adding more paddler launches with public access and meeting ADA criteria has definitely, in the months of our work, emerged as one of our goals. And if we were using general county ARPA funds and we weren't tied to the CDBG income guidelines, there are other locations that are higher priority based on our emerging 5-year master plan. And if we could develop that out as an alternative for the commissioners and council to consider, I think we could get that done.
So I'd have to clarify on that because that was one of the questions that was asked, which I believe that Zach is looking into. There was some confusion as to whether both CDBG and the committed ARPA funds had to be spent on projects that were already done in the SIP. So Zach is reaching out to get that question answered. So
Yeah, we'd be looking at the same project.
yes.
But potentially a different location.
Yes, so that would be, we would have to kind of navigate through that and figure out because it's the county's ARPA funds, right? So I feel like we should be able to spend them how we wish, but they are committed to a specific process that we've been a part of. So I don't know how that all works quite yet, whether that's, I know for the CDBG, it has to be a project that's in the SIP. But for our ARPA funds, I don't know. Donnie, do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't, but I do want to just kind of bring to your attention about your comment. Be cautious when trying to negotiate with property owners to what level you guys are getting into, but if you keep, you're wanting to pursue CDGB funds and you're trying to negotiate with property owners to come into agreement, OCRA may or may not consider that a choice limiting action, which would automatically deem you as ineligible to apply.
Okay.
So they don't necessarily would prefer that you do that on the forefront, knowing that you're going to be applying for CDGB funds. It's something that would need to be accomplished once your project through the application phase was awarded, and that you would be doing a post-award. So just be mindful of that.
Donnie, there was no negotiation as part of this letter,
Just a
we're
reaching- just a
considering this, it
communication.
looks like your property fits, or would you be interested in talking to us?
Sure.
So absolutely no negotiation.
Yeah, just keep that in the back of your mind, so.
Okay, that's helpful.
That's the wonderful part about all the funding, there's the restrictions. I mean, obviously, we will come to the point where we will have something at some point. It's just making sure that we dot all those i's and cross all those t's. So as we currently sit, the Lake James was kind of sitting here because I wasn't sure where we were. The Chinworth was the project that we were looking at the most highly, the one that seemed to be the biggest project. And then the broadband is the other, Sydney Broadband is what we had looked at to try to identify, because that had been drilled down in the conversation with Advancing E-Connectivity Committee. It's a tongue twister. They had determined that out of all the projects for broadband, that would be the one that they would like to present to the county board as a whole. So those three projects really are the only ones that have come forth with anything that would be eligible for a discussion. So,
Amy, and as you told me before, the SIP has to be approved. The
Yep.
LMI's got to be figured out. What do we need to do in the meantime? Anything?
I would say continue just to have conversations. I mean, lean on Donnie for the limiting behaviors, because that is a concern, related to but I think just keep having those conversations, because eventually it will come to the place where we will have to put boots on the ground and things will have to be done. An application, which it's not a competitive application, praise the good Lord, because those are, terrifying. But it is an application nonetheless, just to determine that we meet the PPR tieback, which is the COVID tieback. So that's easy because it's exercise, outdoor exercise, that we meet the CDBG guidelines. We have to choose, whichever guideline that we fall under for the funding. And then we have to have data that basically shows why this is necessary to be done. So if you can do any pre-research just to kind of see what that looks like, looking to see with the Chinworth, is there a case to be made with the trailer park that's there and things that we can gather data to be able to have our ducks in a row once we actually get to be to that point. I would say that's probably the best bet. So I also appreciate your absolute patience, because it can be very infuriating, the process. It's part of the government process that can be very hard to navigate when people are ready. But I can say that we are moving them as fast as we possibly can. I'm private industry woman working in government world, so I try to navigate things as fast as possible, but there still are the processes that we do have to go through. So I think we're closer. It's just Okra has to determine what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with for us to be able to, because they technically have to approve each and every income survey. But I would say just keep doing your research. Lean on Donnie and MACOG for those limiting behaviors, and just know that it's probably going to be one of those things, just like every other part of this process. It's like, hurry up and wait and hurry up. So we'll be waiting, and then one point, Mike's laughing, it's true, we'll hit the ground, and it's going to be gangbusters, and we're going to need to probably have everything that we possibly have. If there's other grants that you guys can look at to potentially capital stack for the projects, if those project costs have increased, I don't know what that looks like now, because the world is such a weird place. So any of those things that you can research to see, once we get to the place that we're at, where will we be financially, and how much would we need of the potential CDBG and ARPA funds? Because I'm assuming the county commissioners and council will want to know those things, because when they make those final decisions as to which projects get those funding, if there are other funding sources that they can stack with that probably, I'm assuming, will make them feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy about the fact that they have additional funding sources to put towards the project. So I know you had mentioned that there was a grant at one point.
Yeah, which, to my knowledge, we had access to some planning money, both from the town of Winona Lake and from the Community Foundation, and I don't know that that has been used.
Well, that money was potentially earmarked for the Trails Master Plan, not for
Okay.
building,
Okay, so it has been earmarked. Thank
sort
you.
of.
Now, was there other, because when I ran into you, but there was like a grant, was it a Next Level Trails grant?
The
that
state does
something-
have next level trails grants that we can potentially look at. Quite honestly, we've been so focused on getting the 5-year master plan, we haven't
Which
even
is-
started
which-
looking at those
yeah.
things.
It'll be
Yeah.
2 years before we go back to that state trails,
Oh, so it's only every 2 years that you can,
that one.
that one, okay.
Presuming the next governor continues it.
And we just also need to keep in mind, it's my understanding that that grant money that's potential for us to access might be running out its term and has to be resubmitted for, at least one of them. So I believe that's in process, but it's just something we have to keep in mind. Don't assume it's there.
Right.
Just as we get closer, we'll have to stay involved with those who said we could use it to make sure that it still is and/or is being protected for us.
Hey, Corey, does tourism, the Indiana Destination Development Corporation, are there ever any grants related to parks, trails?
I think it's all ran through, it's Next Level or it's ran through DNR.
Okay,
So that falls kind of under the same umbrella. Right now, I know they're doing the art application grants. which is
Yeah.
Specifically to parks. I think it's all ran through DNR, which is already done for the
Okay.
Unfortunately.
trying to see if there's any that we've
Other
potentially,
options.
yeah.
I mean, I can look in and reach out if you want me to, see if there is anything we're missing.
Because it is a tourism activity, and I would be hard to believe that there's not something from somewhere.
I mean, I'm happy to look in, I'm sure you guys will as well, but I can reach out to you, I can see if there's something.
Something that we're missing.
Float around or maybe will be coming up the line, just to show, I mean, they're trying to increase their funding overall for tourism through the budget from like $4 million to $14 million.
Oh, wow, that's a little bit of
Not
increase.
sure if they're being grant funded in it, I think it's all media buy, but there is an opportunity if the budget is, if legislation gets passed, there may be an opportunity there, but I'm not sure.
Corey, we really appreciate you looking. I mean, with all of us never having done this before, any lift you can do for us would be great.
Yeah, I can see if, I'll let you know.
And she's the tourism guru.
Yeah.
She really is.
Bigger ones or even smaller ones. Because I noticed the Indiana State Tourism Guide has a picture of the Terre Haute Bike Park on the cover.
Yeah, I mean, if you have it, have an opportunity, you have it in the visitors, they rebranded, it's a fantastic shot, bike related, yes. So there is something I can see.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's, probably if, from an execution standpoint, researching other granting opportunities, getting details solidified within the guide of what we can do. and holding tight and being as patient as possible would be probably the best bet. So we will hopefully be able to move this forward quickly once we get everything approved at the county and finalize that last phase. Then it's really up to us to work with OCRA to get, and MACOG to get those other parts and pieces moving. So anything else?
Thank you for coming.
You're most
again.
welcome. I appreciate your patience, and I am very excited. We're going to have, our hope is to have groundbreakings at each of the projects, have the radio and local media there to be able to celebrate, because we deserve to celebrate all the hard work that we have all done together, so.
I can tell you the Parks Board would very much like to have its first groundbreaking.
Wouldn't it be so neat, though? I think it would be really neat to have it be the County Parks Board started, and then they got to use this help grant to have their the first groundbreaking. Talk to Kedco Marketing, because she's going to help us, and she's got this harebrained idea to bring the radio or the TV station to come and to do that. So that would be pretty neat, I think, for us if we could pull it off, because we'd have the opportunity to share with the greater part of Indiana that we're making things happen here. So see what we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank
all
you.
your hard work.
So Donnie is next, but I do want to mention I have an absolutely hard stop. I have to be on another Teams call at 2, so if we get close to that time, I'm going to get up and vamoose and turn the meeting over to, is your voice strong enough?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Did you have something before Donnie comes up?
So we had the 3 worksheets we submitted for the help SIP process, and we talked about 2 of them, but we didn't talk about the third, which is the Blue Way, Greenway master plan. And is that something?
So I
that
want to
we-
talk about the master plan as well. I sort of
Okay.
hand wrote it down. It's not formally on the agenda, so we aren't going to be able to take any votes on it or anything. But I think talking about it today, talking about next steps for the RFP for the Trails Master Plan is something we need to get done today.
Okay.
But let's have Donnie come up and give us a MACOG update. Donnie knocked it out of the park just the other night with our first public open house. Thank you for your work.
Well, I can't take full credit because obviously it's the hard work of you all too and everyone here in the steering committee. So I actually don't have a lot as far as an update goes, and this is when everyone's just going, oh, and no activities, so we're not going to do any breakout sessions. But as Rob mentioned, this month we are in the public review phase, and so we're opening it up for residents, visitors to provide their comments on the draft 5-year Parks Master Plan. That started last week, Tuesday, and we'll be going through April 6th, where we'll be taking comments. We have an online as well as a paper version of a public review form. So if you haven't seen or taken that, regardless if you're a park board member or a steering committee member, please take that, as well as encourage your followers, friends, families to complete that, because it's really important to get their feedback on confirmation of whether the goals and strategies is what they would like to see and support over the next 5 years. The Park Master Plan is also available online, as well as it's at each of the clerks and libraries throughout the county. So it's open for public review and input. We do have 3 open houses scheduled for this month. Tuesday was our first one in North Webster at the community center. Each of these open houses are from 5 to 7. And the next one is this evening in the Mentone at the Bell Memorial Library. So if you haven't been out to North Webster, I hope to see you. Well, I won't actually be there, but I hope they see you this evening. The last one will be on March 28th, Warsaw Community Public Library. The format for the 3 of these are the same. The content that would be collected will be the same. It's just to provide great opportunity for everyone who can't make one event to be able to do the other one. So I think we had a good attendance in North Webster, and hope we have a good turnout for this evening in Mentone. So yeah, I do have flyers on the back table for anyone who needs that or wants to use it to help share or promote. It has the dates for the open houses as well as the links for the public review form and where to access the draft master plan. So, Bill.
Tonight, like, I was envisioning helping, when should I be there?
Great question. So the event starts at 5. The park board members, Mike and Troy, willingly has helped to set up, and I believe they're going to shoot for like 4:30. So if you would like to try to shoot to get there around 4:30 to help speed up that Senate process, that would be probably greatly appreciated.
And quite honestly, the biggest influx was right at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. And people honestly will start showing up at 4:50. So the sooner we can get set up and ready, the better.
So I know Mike's got a comment. I just also want to say we've had a couple of people reach out to us. If you haven't looked at the master plan, it is amazing, all the stuff that MACOG has pulled into that. We've had a couple of people say, hey, this has changed or this is different. Just reach out to me, reach out to Donnie. We want it to be right. We want it to be updated. So you can always reach me. We actually do have a Parks Board email, parksboard@kcgov.com, which I watch. So feel free to reach out and say, oh, no, this isn't right. Change this. And we'll jump on it.
And that's actually kind of my question and comment. What's the process from here? I mean, obviously, we need to dive deep, catch typos, corrections, that type of thing. When do you need all of those by? So I guess and then if the public input stops April 6th and our meeting's the 13th and this is submitted by the 15th, what are those processes in between that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, if you can forward me those comments, I'll take them now, even before the 6th, but definitely after the 6th. I probably would converse, given the necessity, by email, to quick response. If it's just type corrections, I'll easily make those, but if it's like earth shattering, hey, why did you guys propose a strategy like this? What I would do is share it back, probably start with the board, to make sure you guys are aware of this, and then get everyone's input, whether it's deemed appropriate to make any changes, major changes like that in the master plan after the 6th. So given the necessity of it, it'll have to be by email. But I'd be happy to come down between then to address any of those in person too.
I think it's just a matter of
Yeah.
if there's something that needs to be changed, hopefully nothing glaring. But if we get, how do we address if we have some modifications we want to do from the public input to a goal or to a strategy? Can we do that in that time frame?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's the purpose, right? But
Yep.
I'm just trying to understand so we would probably want to then, after the March 28th, we would
Start
probably have to have
collecting,
that discussion
organizing.
on the 13th to formally approve that change, so it's included by the 15th.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, 13th is the next park board meeting
yes.
in April.
I think it's the 13th.
Yeah, we moved it up a couple days to make sure we had
Yeah.
some time.
Yes.
Just in case.
And before the 15th. And Donnie, I don't think you had a chance to mention the number of responses so far to the online form.
We are nearing 80 responses to the online forum.
And then we
that-
had like 20 people that were,
Yep,
the
and so
first-
the activity for the open house it's basically an in-person activity of that review form. So it's another way of capturing those comments. So the nearer 80 that we're getting on the online form, not sure about the paper yet, because we haven't heard that people have returned anything in. Plus then who filled out the activity Tuesday night, plus then tonight, plus then the 28th, that will all get added up and compiled. And really, that activity will help the board just kind of narrow in your focus on this is what the public would really like to support. So it's not like, unless they had, so far I haven't heard, comments that really need to be changed in the wording and like a different kind of a strategy. The results of that will just kind of inform you once the plan's kind of adopted, again, focusing on your implementation efforts.
And priorities.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's all I had. So.
Thanks, Donnie. So we had a couple other items that weren't formally on the agenda that we wanted to discuss, sort of next steps, I guess. I know that both Mike and I had mentioned internally talking to Corey at the Kosciuszko Visitors Bureau, and I think Mike is going to take the lead on that one in terms of possibly hosting stuff for us and branding and things. So if anybody wants to work with Mike,
I think Matt's already
okay.
part of that team.
Perfect. Also need to talk about next steps for the request for proposal. So I did email everybody yesterday the formal document from Marcia McSherry, which is the county's plan to do a request for proposal. I know Donnie's indicated he can help us flesh out the formal document. Clearly, I think we do want to do a preliminary request for proposal. So what I would propose on that, and I think this is really a continuing item, is that Troy and I meet with Donnie, probably by teams, flesh out what needs to be in that preliminary request, which won't be the full request for proposal. Select a date, and then decide how we're going to get notices out to all the potential vendors to come meet with us. And then that will guide drafting the formal request for proposal. I can let you know that this is also sort of pending the SIP approval as well, because that is potentially some of the funding mechanisms for the county for this. Could potentially be ARPA grants. So we're definitely, I think, in the ballpark of the calendaring we need to be ready to go once we potentially have the funds to do it.
Can we talk a little bit about, I agree we need a trails master plan, but the purpose of it and how we're going to use it, just so I think it is a different animal than the county, parks plan, because county parks plan, master plan is required to access some grants. I don't believe the trails plan is required to do that at all. However, I think it's very focused and very detailed. My impression, it will give us the detail and the roadmap, no pun intended, of how we move forward. But I just want to make sure that we're discussing that and kind of all on the same, have all the same understanding of the purpose of this document and how we're going to use it.
I completely agree. I think that's all up for discussion at this point in time and up for help from the vendors. My sort of impression is we to some extent would say, here's where we think we're talking about building trails. Come talk to us about what a request for proposal for a trail master plan and these routes would be. I know we have a vendor here. Is that sort of what we need to do for you at this point in time? We talked a little bit ahead of time.
So I think I know I've seen a couple, but I can't remember if that someone sent me that separate from the Parks Board or for the Parks Board. But I think Winona Lake has had one. I think Marshall County has one. Are these centralized anywhere that we can make sure the entire board has access so that we see some examples? Or if
Do you have
one of our-
marshals? Okay. Okay. For
For
trails.
the trails? Yes, yes. Okay.
Oh, you got it?
And any other examples? So again, if you have example of one, I think it would just help.
Also researching other examples that may fit outside of Marshall County, Elkhart Ocean, also had a trail plan, and master plan. But we're helping research what other master plans are out there
Okay.
would suit what Cousins County is looking for. Because Marshall County, when they had done theirs was kind of more of not as detailed, like going into the nitty-gritty construction details, engineering details. It was still kind of at that higher planning level of where routes should be locating, getting somewhat closer to that. I think you guys are getting past that point. You've been doing a lot of planning already. I think we're ready. But I think that's what we need to talk about is what do you guys want to get out of this? There's no requirements from a grantor agency saying that these are the elements that you can have in it. So it's really what you want to put into it. What do you want to get out of this?
I think also, Donnie, we have to be aware of cost differences. If we're going in and saying we want heavy-duty engineering studies to go along with this, our cost is going to go way up as a result of that.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing I'm just reiterating is what you put in is what you're going to get out.
So, and then, not trying to complicate it more, we're calling it the Trails Plan. Does this include Blue Ways? Do we want it to include a portion of that towards, ingress, egress sites, launch sites? And is it as much an active transportation plan, perhaps, than a trails plan? Because, when we've talked about one of our goals being connecting the community, I think it's as much about active transportation as it is the recreation aspect of it.
I think those are great points. And I think that the advantage of doing a preliminary meeting on a request for a proposal is you can talk to the vendors.
Okay.
And you can say things like, if we want to do a complete active transportation plan and they go, oh, that's probably going to be $500,000, we know that we're probably not going to be able to do that. If we go and say, we think over the next 5 years, this is what we can take on, and they say, yeah, that's probably going to be inside your budget, that may inform us on what we're going to do.
Okay.
Yeah, Amy?
So I actually thought that was one of the projects that was on help, because we've been so focused.
Can you speak in the microphone? Yeah.
We've been so focused on the James Lake and the Chinworth that I forgot that that was actually a project that was part of that. Have you obtained other funding sources, or is that something that we need to?
For the
still think-
Trails Master Plan?
For the Blue Way Green Way plan, is that what you're speaking about?
So, yes,
Okay, you have obtained other sources?
no.
No, okay.
So,
These are all
So-
somewhat the same thing that
Yes.
we're talking about.
Okay.
yes. So Winona Lake has tentatively indicated that we could use some grant money they have for a master plan, but we haven't formally talked to them about that at this point in time. So that's just sort of floating out there. That's the only money and whatever money the commissioners would find for us.
Okay, so that will be one that we have to think about as well. That was one that we've forgotten about because the other two are so complicated.
Right.
And I was sitting back asking Marcia, did they get different funding sources, or do we do I need to make sure that we have that one as part of the conversation as well? Because I understood. Is that what the discussion was?
That was part of my understanding, but it's going to be dependent upon how much the plan's expected to cost.
Because I know that was
So
one-
Amy,
yeah.
is this something that maybe we ought to meet again?
It would probably be nice for us, and then have Carrie to have him be part of the conversation, because I do remember him at some point in the recesses of my mind stating about having the ARPA funds be spent for that outside of the help process. But I would want to verify that was indeed the case before we move forward.
Okay,
So that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot
yeah,
with
let's do
getting
that.
requests for proposals and doing something that we're, if we're going to spend the money from help, it's truly, like I say often, a Tetris game. We just
Well,
have
as
to make-
Rob just said, we don't know what we're asking for yet, so we don't even know what funding we're going to need yet. So I think having
Okay.
all of these options as open
Okay.
is important right now.
Yeah, it's hard to know whether to put the chicken or the egg first, or which
Right.
part and piece, right? So, true. So, but I think we could probably have a conversation. I have a strategy meeting with Carrie on Friday, so I may mention to him that we're
Why
having.
don't you do that, and if you can
that
reach
I've
out
been
if we can have a
invited to.
meeting.
Yeah, that you guys are attempting to try to figure out which step to take, and it would be helpful if we had some guidance, so.
And we've talked to Carrie about it, but I think further discussion now would be good, since
Yeah.
we're really to that stage to move forward.
Since you guys are closer, it sounds like, with the Trails plan or moving along.
I think it's fair to say that our work on the five-year master plan is starting to wind down a little bit.
Okay.
And we're ready to start picking up other,
But to be fair, we've
activities.
called something a Greenways and Blueways plan, we're calling something a Trails plan. It's really all the same thing.
it's really all the same thing.
Yeah, so I think that it's probably high time that we circle back around, because you guys are moving faster than we are. So, that's great.
We
So-
want to be ready to go.
I know, I like it, it's wonderful. So, okay, I will mention that to Carrie and see what he says related to sitting down to speak about that, so we can
Right.
give you some direction. So-
Okay.
And just a reminder for the board, I think Aggie and Troy, you had dug up a previous KLA or KYLA proposal about the Blueways, which I think is a great starting point even for this discussion. So I just encourage the rest of the board, as we get into Greenways and Blueways, to familiarize yourself with that document.
And we can distribute it again if you want us to.
I think that'd be good. It's probably lost someplace in my emails.
Yeah. okay.
And if
Send
you
that out
guys, when
again.
we do this, make sure that you include that Parks Board email, because that way everything will sort of still be contained in the Parks Board email.
What is it
for
again?
parksboard@kcgov.com. Well, I am getting very close to my stop. Do we have anything else for today?
Yeah, I do have a quick, so, we can wait with the master plan approval, but we do have a line item in there that we've identified that at some point we're gonna want a logo for the county parks and recreation, whether it's the board or any entity that we create. Matt and I did some initial work on it. That was a high estimate, I think, on the cost of that of $1,000. I think it'll actually be likely less than that, but we want to make sure in case it extends or some issues it's covered. But do we have any type of budget to cover that now?
Rhonda, I think that's a question for you. I thought they said we had a small budget this year. How about if you and I talk later then, both on how much it is and what I would need to do to approve spending from it, if that has to go in front of anybody else. I
Does
think,
this board have to approve it?
well, that's something that I'll have to bring back to everybody. You know, some of us have talked independently, especially the other night, about, boy, if we break ground, we want a sign there that says this is the project of the county parks board. So we really need a logo already at this point in time to be able to do that kind of stuff. And gosh, we could be breaking ground late this summer.
We're
Really.
available to Rob. We just need to go ahead from
Exactly, yeah.
Rob, I guess.
Well, we need to go ahead that we have dollars and then understand the approval. Again, does this board need to approve of that type of dollar amount? Or since it's in there and we've discussed it, is it approved already?
Yeah, and we probably ought to talk about if we should do something different for a budget for next year and see what carries and everybody's willing to do. That's getting close too, isn't it? Okay.
Is there any point where we should do can we do a contingency approval to spend this money now if, assuming, if we determine there is a budget, or else we're going to have to figure the budget out and then have to move, and
Do
do
you have any
this
problem with
approve it in
that?
April.
You'd have to, she's the boss. So as I heard, your motion was that we allocate up to $1,000
To create
to
a
what
logo.
vendor?
Well, we've talked to one, but the pricing is very much in line with other graphic designers.
So Rhonda, would it be okay, just a flat $1,000 to create a branding for the Kosciuszko County Parks? That would be
Yep.
the motion then. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Well, the ayes have it. Then Ron and I will talk about whether that was actually a meaningful vote.
Yeah, so we'll wait for the go-ahead from the two of you before we pursue any other activities.
Perfect. Anything else for today? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion that we adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Robert, we already signed one of the sets of minutes for you.
There's two sets that went around.
Recording stopped.
Well, unless you need a special set of sign one, sign set.
Yeah.